meaning as return, as Shabbat, which is like a resting day, and also the word for literally sitting, right? We have like shuvalenu, return unto us. Sometimes we ask God like shuv alenu, right? Make the word shuv is return. Okay, so that's what teshuva is. It's a returning. So if we're returning, we have to ask the question, what are we turning from, and towards what are we turning? Implicit in any notion of turning is that. And I think the answer to that question creatively in my thinking is found in the greater meaning of that word shuv. So it also means to sit or to rest. So it's returning to a rested state. It's returning to a place where the mind isn't conflicted. It's returning to a place where we're no longer in the weekday, in the doing. We're sitting now, we're resting. And some of the greater teachings from all of the spiritual teachers out there say that where do we find God? Right? It's not in the future, not in the past, not in the mind. It's in the present moment. Like all of the teachings, all of the healing, all of the wisdom, and all of the lessons, all of the realizations that we've ever had and ever will have happen in the present moment. It's so simple, but we have to return, we have to relax, we have to become receptive. So implicit in the word teshuva, I would say, is a sort of open receptivity, sitting, relaxing, resting, returning. But it's the deeper exoteric meaning of it, perhaps, is that's why that's repentance. That's the only place from which healing and learning and realization can actually occur. Just to give one practical example of this, to see how this is, I think, kind of universal. If we're in a fight with someone or healing something between us and another, the resolution never happens by arguing better. Like the resolution never happens by tightening up, standing up, and making our point better than the other person. The resolution always happened in a state of openness and receptivity, a willingness to be more undefended. In fact, I would say totally undefended, totally open to hear, totally trusting. When we bring forth the energy of distrust or there's something more to do, we don't ever get to the core of it. So I just think there's a really beautiful invitation in just looking at the deeper meaning of the word teshuva. When I was a kid, I grew up Orthodox, we learned, you got to ask for, you have to ask for forgiveness on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashana. I would tell my siblings, do you forgive me for anything I may have done to you? And they would say, yes. And they would say, do you forgive me for anything that I've made? I'm like, sure. And I'm a kid. I'm not holding any grudges anyway. And I think, though, culturally, we do often hold these abstract, and whether we're theistically oriented or not, or religiously oriented even, it's just very easy to hold these more abstract ideas of, if I do the right things, I will atone for my sins. Like, if I do the right things, or if I say the right things, or if I give enough, or if I do these physical actions, I will alleviate my guilt or my sense of wrongdoing. And I think the deeper calling of teshuva isn't so much about these actions or these words, but a real return to a silent place and to a rest. And I think that's at the heart of all the liturgy. And that's actually the heart of all the practices. I think the apex of the Shacharit prayer is that Shemona Esrei, that Amidah, where we're standing and we get into a quiet place, in quiet communion. So that's the first of the three remedies for reversing the unfortunate decree that may be upon us. Teshuva. The second one is Tefilah. Okay, let's talk about Tefilah. And again, I just love the opportunity to look at these ideas, but really examine what they actually are, or a possibility of how to look at them. Tefilah, which we call prayer, also shares the root with you help me out with this. It's falling, right? What's pull, right? Like the word supplication is maybe somewhat of a resonant word, but falling, it's like, and it's not this direct, I'm speaking or praying or asking or making an entreaty to God for something to happen or change. Like the energetic of Tefilah is a falling. And so then we have to ask, what falling into what? Falling from what, right? There, I had it in my mind. Can you give me an example of where that root is where that root for falling is used elsewhere? Nifila, that's what it was. Yeah, Nifila. Right. Oh, in Breshit, yeah. Nifila, yeah. Nifila, yeah. There's like a nafalti, I fell. Nafalti, I fell. There you go. Okay. Right. There we go. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, they flew up and I fell on their faces. Whoops, nafalti. All right, I need help getting up. Like there's this really humble quality in the word tefillah when we understand its root in nefila, right? Nefila and falling. We can take this in so many directions, but what happens when you fall? Like where were you prior to the fall and where are you at? It's gravity, right? Like when you fall, you're no longer holding yourself up. You're in a place where you can't support yourself with your own strength anymore. And usually a fall is a mistake. Like you tripped and you fell, right? But there's also that biblical orientation to falling on my face. Like you're in such a place of, I can't do this on my own. I can't solve this on my own. I can't actually orchestrate, organize this situation in my mind. I'm falling on my face and I'm giving myself over to something greater. My legs aren't going to hold me up. My arms aren't going to do this. My mind, my thinking, my conditioning. And that's the teaching that we shared yesterday with Moshe. It has nothing to do with your body, with your capacities. In a sense, God's saying, fall into me. That's that gesture. I'm gonna be with your mouth. I'm gonna control your speech. I'm gonna give you the guidance. Surrender yourself. Let go of trying to hold it all together yourself. In a way, I think Tefilah, it speaks to a sort of humility in recognizing that it's not about us and our own control. There's a sort of letting go of even the way that we think about things, to really fall into God, or to fall into truth, to fall into love. Not fall in love, fall into love. Interesting. Yeah. To really fall into love is to let it take over. There's such a quality of, I give up trying. I give up, right? And there's this level of prayer where I think we're asking for something, like maybe like, give me this. And of course, in the Jewish tradition, there are 3 different levels of prayer. There's like hoda'ot, gratitude, thanks, requests, and praises. But psychologically, there's a dimension of prayer where we're entreating God. Help me with this, or give me this thing, or solve this problem, or change this person, or whatever. But that level, I think, which is common, right? It's like the example of like, we're suffering and we're like, God, please help me. That level, when I feel it, doesn't have the quality of falling. We're still standing up. We're still standing up thinking that we understand what the problem is. And then based on our understanding, we're asking God to solve it. I think falling is even a dissolving of our organized understanding of the problem. Willingness to recognize that we're often just putting together our thoughts and our perceptions and then trying to solve the things that we think we're perceiving. There's like a deeper level of, let me take over. Let me show you something completely otherworldly, completely different. And we know that, like just taking the biblical stories itself, did the Hebrew people have any clue what they were up to, what they were doing? No. Did they complain continually? Yes. What were they being told? Just freaking trust me already. Just let go, let go, let go, let go. Can I say freaking here? It's okay. Someone once said it's just a word. Okay. And that was the hardest thing. I can't let go because I know how this is supposed to go. And how often do we pray on the premise of knowing how it's supposed to go? So I think real prayer is almost, or maybe a deeper dimension of it, is this acknowledgement that I don't really understand even what I'm asking about. I don't even know what it is that I need. I don't even know how or what it is that needs to change or how to change. I think any of us who have come to places within our own self where we recognize, oh my God, this is a behavior, this is unhealthy, this is actually damaging or hurtful or toxic. This is actually causing pain and suffering to myself and to other people. When we really grasp that, I think in each case, there's somewhat of a recognition, maybe at first, I don't know how to change that myself. I can't do this on my own. Like, there's always this turning over to a grace and to a power much greater than ourselves. We have to have some sort of, or there's that, or there's sort of like the strict discipline, repression, right? But to heal, to really change ourselves from the inside out, I think we always need to be available for something greater than ourselves to take us there. Like our willingness and our availability. Yeah, our openness to be wrong. That's the point. It's like our openness to be wrong. And our openness to learn is so essential. And I'll just share one more thing about this idea of prayer being a falling into God. We've heard that line, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? And I think about that a lot. And I don't know if you've heard it, but I've heard it a lot. It's a great line. So when we pray, there's almost like this really cool recognition of, I must be wrong. I must be wrong because I'm not happy. I must be wrong because I'm not at peace. I must be wrong because I'm not feeling good about this situation. And so, and this is why I think there's a sort of like greater faith and trust in something outside of our own power, because it must be that truth is healing, that truth is redeeming, that the answer to this thing, to that which I'm wanting to know, is actually incredibly unifying and healing. So one of the most beautiful experiences, I think, on the spiritual journey, which is life, is the ongoing recognition that I made a mistake in my thinking. I was wrong. Okay, so one more dimension around prayer, one more. So when I just go deeper into the sense of falling, we let go of holding our own weight. But differentiating that from losing our, that can easily become a I'm helpless, help me kind of stance, where we just sort of fall into a puddle of almost a victimized kind of state of thinking. There's a sort of strength and beauty and this inexpressible communion with the divine. Almost this like approaching consummation between ourselves and God in this deeper prayer, where we're not lost. We're actually more here. We're more in the moment. We're actually more in a powerful place. And we're not in any kind of victim place, but it's simultaneous to letting go of everything that we thought, loosening the world from all we thought it was. Like sincerely saying, okay, I'm going to go to Pharaoh and replace Pharaoh with, our personal problem, to our personal perception of enslavement and the source of enslavement, to redeem our Hebrew people, fill in the blank with that which wants to become freed and liberated, and right. And then also it doesn't want to be free because the mindset of that which is unfree doesn't really want to open up. So we can take these metaphors and we go there, and it's this beautiful experience of knowing that I am not alone. I am not doing this on my own, and I can trust something far greater than my own understanding or my own ability to control. And so there's no powerlessness in that, but we're also not in control. The ego isn't operative. So that's just something that I I think there are dimensions or layers to prayer, almost like a ladder towards a deeper, I'm letting go more deeply, and I'm also in greater power and resonance. So final reflections on the last word, Teshuva, Tefilah, Tzedakah. So again, the interesting thing and what I'm grateful for, appreciating about the Hebrew tradition is that there's a particular language. I was telling Michelle yesterday, something that I never thought before, because she'll often share with me different translations of the Bible, Old Testament or New Testament, and show me and ask me, oh, what's that? Or, and I told her, the Hebrew Bible, which for Christians is the Old Testament, has there's no versions, right? It's there's only one version. And I never thought that before, I don't think. And, she gave me this website with this 30 different translations. And it's just really interesting to think about that. And that's really beautiful. I think within any lineage or tradition, those that study the original texts find the greatest wisdom. There's this one great translation of the Tao Te Ching that I'm really into. And this guy, I feel he really gets the original language. Honoring and respecting the language and the deeper esoteric reality of that language is so essential to understanding any kind of wisdom teaching. And we have the Torah, we have the Tanakh, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, we have all of it, and it's the same. Maybe there are a couple words here, I don't know, over the past couple thousand years, who knows, but it's the same. There's no versions, which means we can always kind of come back and reference back the Hebrew language and look more deeply into its meaning and the deeper layers of it. Okay, so with Tzedakah, it's again, if you just read that in English, you get charity, and that's really boring. It doesn't inspire me, doesn't take me anywhere. Maybe charity has some really cool epistemology, or the root of a word, whatever that word is. Etymology, yeah, I'm sure it does. Latin, I mean, everything's really interesting, really. But let's get to the Hebrew. Tzedakah, the root of tzedakah is tzedek, which is righteousness. How would you, justice, okay, thank you, justice. Pitchuli sharei tzedek, open for me the gates of righteousness. If you're a righteous person, you're called a tzaddik. Or if you think of tzedek as justice too, that's an interesting thing to think about. But just taking those word vibrations and retranslating tzedakah as not just charity, but a state of righteousness. Yeah, tzedek tordof. So there's a reason why justice and righteousness kind of come hand to hand with that translation, because justice, which we often think about in very worldly human terms, like you did something and now you got to go to court or pay your fine, justice has to be served, the wrongdoing of there's that level of justice. And then there's sort of a divine level of justice, which I think is greater than our smaller judgments and conceptions of how to balance the scales. And so justice being equated with righteousness says righteousness is just, and righteousness is never going to hold judgment or scorn or condemnation. And righteousness wants to, I'm going to take the moment to find the right words here. Righteousness wants to do the right thing. Righteousness is just in its mindset because it's considering actions that have impact and how my presence, my beingness, and what I'm doing with myself and my resources, what it's for and what the impact of it, right? All the stories of the tzaddikim are people oftentimes that will privately, they'll do all these really kind things for people, but no one knows about it. All of the great stories that we ever hear about people healing or receiving charitable actions almost come from someone aligning with a state of compassion and care and consideration and giving without any kind of other ulterior motive. And then that has a huge impact on the people that we're receiving. Right? It's so much more than just giving of charity, or maybe the deeper meaning of charity is this vibration of righteousness and aligning with a more divine understanding of just. There's this experience once, I used to take martial arts, and outside of the karate center, the garbage can fell. And so all the garbage was on the floor. And I guess the way I grew up, my instinct was to pick up the garbage and, put it all back in the trash can. And my teacher said, oh, don't do that. Someone else will, there's someone is hired to take care of that and do that. And I remember I was a boy and I was just thinking in that moment, it never occurred to me to wait for the person who's hired to pick up the trash when that trash is right there in front of me. There was one occasion where in high school, a boy took a dead chicken and put it on the lunch table. And everyone was laughing. And my first instinct was this is very unsanitary and unsafe. So I just took it and threw it away. And then I got the janitor and asked the janitor to clean the table. And I'm not sharing this because anything personal, just these are examples that spontaneously come up in the moment. But those examples are just something we can all relate to in terms of what does it look like to do the right thing without any kind of ulterior motive, not seeking any kind of accolades, but just caring, just wanting to serve in a good way. To me, that's tzedakah. That's being in a place of tzedek. That's justice. That's being in alignment with a higher will. So then the energy of tzedakah, it's not just giving charity. So that's growing up as an Orthodox Jew. You give charity. It's okay, here's put some money in a jar. And it can feel so removed from the energy of justice. It can feel so removed from the energy of tzedek, from the energy of caring, from the sincerity of wanting to do the right thing and wanting to refine our character to be in greater alignment. For me, getting on time for the things that I'm committed to would be me working on my tzedakah. It's not I'm giving something it's to be a person of tzedek would be to be in integrity, to have awareness of the impact that my actions or lack of thoughtfulness has on other people. And I think to close this little meditative teaching, when we practice a charitable mindset, a charitable way, a tzedek-oriented way of being, it grows. There's that teaching, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, right? A good deed, so to speak, causes and affects perpetuation in good deeds, right? And avera goreret avera, we create momentum in the direction of whatever habits we create, right? So living in tzedakah becomes a way of living with grace and experiencing more grace in life and in our being. Let me just find those words. Tzedek tirdof. We become interested, justice, or righteousness, tirdof, pursue, tirdof. I think what happens as we practice that, it's more than how can I be charitable, or who can I give to, or what can I do, or what good thing can I do? It becomes more of a, how can I really refine the totality of my life? Oh, this area needs to be cleaned up. I can be more mindful of how this is affecting, or waking up and just having the sense of how can I serve today? What can I give? It's a way of being where, coming back to the Tefilah, I think the combination of all three of these, shuv, relax, sit down, return, be held, Tefilah, fall, and let God hold you and carry you and answer all things. And Tsedakah, give everything that you have, give your life to something of greater meaning. And we are learning to entrain an attitude of tzedek. And just one more thought, because otherwise what happens, we get stuck back into the problems. What's that? Grace is such a good word. Yeah, yeah. I think what happens otherwise, we don't build that momentum towards tzedek. We end up getting stuck in our problems, right? So a person who has a lot of problems can't also be authentically, sincerely overflowing and giving and serving. The two don't come together, but we almost forget our problems and thus reframe them and elevate them to a higher perception when we give ourselves. And we become graceful. We live in grace. We give grace. By grace, we live. And we get to understand almost the deeper dimension of God or divinity and love. So thank you all for joining me for these meditative reflections this morning. Good Shabbos, Chag Sameach.